Hi, we are going to work on the assignment together. Your job is to read 4 origin stories, so stories of how the world began, and fill out this graphic organizer based on what you read for the 4 origin stories. We're going to do one together, so then you need to do that on your own graphic organizer and then do the other 3 by yourself, and then that is what you turn in. The first origin story is modern scientific. Then there's also a Chinese origin story, a Judeo-Christian origin story, and an Iroquois origin story, the Great Turtle. We are going to do the modern scientific origin story together, and we need to be looking for these pieces of information to put into our graphic organizer. The source of the world, the originator of the world, how the earth formed, the age of the earth, first life forms, how humans formed, and then the relationship between humans and plants and animals. So as we're reading, we have those in the back of our mind to be able to pull those out and put them in our graphic organizer. So, modern scientific. It's called the Big Bang. This is a picture of the planetary nebula taken from the Hubble telescope by NASA, and it's called the Hercules constellation. So in the beginning, as far as we know, there was nothing. Suddenly, from a single point, all the energy in the universe bursts forth. Since that moment, 13.8 billion years ago, the universe has been expanding and cooling down as it gets bigger. Gradually, energy cooled enough to become matter. One electron could stay in orbit around one proton to become an atom of hydrogen. Great clouds of hydrogen swirled around space until gravity pulled some atoms so close together that they began to burn as stars. Stars swirled together in giant clusters called galaxies. Now there are galaxies numbering in the billions. After each star burned up all its matter, it died in a huge explosion. The explosion generated so much heat that some atoms fused and got more and more complex, forming many different elements, including gold and silver. One giant star, our mother star, exploded and scattered clouds of gas containing all the elements needed to form living beings. About 5 billion years ago, gravity pulled these atoms into a new star, our sun. The leftover pieces of matter stuck to each other and formed 8 planets which revolve around the sun. The third planet out, Earth, became our home. It was the perfect size, not too big, not too small, and the perfect distance from the sun. Not too far or not too close. A thin crust formed over Earth's hot interior, and the temperature was just right for water to form on parts of the surface. Gradually, the chemicals in the water formed inside of membranes and got more complex until one-celled living organisms appear, able to maintain themselves and reproduce. About 3 billion years ago, these one-celled creatures reproduced almost exactly, but not quite. They gradually change in response to the environment, but they also change their environment. They learned to burn energy from the sun, and they released oxygen into the atmosphere. The oxygen formed an ozone layer around Earth that protected life from the sun's rays. Eventually, cells stuck together to form creatures with many cells. Plants and animals came out of the sea onto land and became more complex and aware until about 100,000 years ago, human beings evolved from a shared ancestors with species of apes. Humans could talk in symbols and draw and sing and dance and cooperate more than other animals could. Humans learned to write and to accumulate their learning so that it kept expanding. Humans increased in skills and in numbers until there were too many people and too few big animals in some places. Then humans learned to grow their own food and herd their own animals. Some animals learned to cooperate with humans. This gave humans new sources of food and work energy, and they could live in larger and larger groups. These groups expanded into cities and empires, using more and more of the resources of Earth. Humans collaborated and learned collectively in more complex ways. They traveled, traded, and exchanged inventions, creating vast civilizations of astonishing beauty and complexity. Humans were always looking for more energy for their use. About 200 years ago, we learned to use the energy from coal, trees that grew more than 300,000 years ago. Then were buried underground. Humans learned to burn oil. Animals remained buried long ago under the sea, using these fossil fuels. Humans began to change their climate quickly, as the gases released from burning these fuels ascended into the atmosphere. Now humans are in a predicament. Our population is increasing rapidly. Fossil fuels are running out. We are pushing many plants and other animals into extinction, and we are changing the climate. What are we humans going to do next? So that is the story, the scientific modern story of how the earth began. So then I am going to go back to my graphic organizer, and I'm going to go back and forth. The source of the earth. So where did it come from? It came from a single point. All the energy in the universe burst forth. So energy cooled to become matter, and one electron could stay in orbit. So I'm going to say the source of the world was a single point, all the energy, and it burst forth. Okay. The originator of the world. So is there more of like a person who is the originator of the world in this story, in the modern scientific story? And we already talked about energy as being the source, but that was the very beginning. So was there more to the story? And the answer is yes. It started with a lot of atoms and stars would get pulled together and things would explode, and more atoms would get fused together to make the elements. So the originator of the world was the electrons and the atoms coming together and becoming more complex to make elements. I'm going to say atoms became more complex and created elements. And elements are the building blocks of everything that we see in the world, such as the examples they gave of gold and silver. Okay, how was the earth formed? So now we got to get down to here, to Earth. One star exploded and scattered clouds of gas. So about 5 billion years ago, that happened, and then that formed our sun, and the leftover pieces started revolving around the sun. So the Earth was formed 5 billion years ago when there was an explosion that created our sun. So the age of Earth, 5 billion years old. It was formed by an explosion that created the sun and the pieces of matter revolving around it, one of which is the Earth. Okay. First life forms. So, what was the first piece of living organisms on Earth? So, we go back to our paragraph about the Earth, and it looks like first there was water, and inside water, there were one-celled living organisms, so just one cell. We are far more complex as humans, but it started off as one cell, and then they began to reproduce. Okay, now how were humans formed? So we're not quite to humans yet. Here we go. Eventually, cells stuck together to form creatures with more cells. So first, plants and animals came out of the sea onto land and became more complex and aware until about 100,000 years ago, humans start to evolve. So humans formed when cells became more complex and stuck together and started to evolve from the species apes. Say from right, what is the relationship that humans have with plants and animals? So once humans evolved, they grow their own food, they herd their own animals, they eat the animals, they eat the food, and as we get down closer to the end, it talks about how humans are slowly using up resources. So our relationship with animals and plants are pushing plants and animals into extinction. So humans eat plants and animals. But what have humans done? Pushed animals and plants into extinction. All right, so that was filling out the chart for Modern Scientific. Now your job is to do Chinese, Judeo-Christian, and Iroquois.